Hi and welcome. Today we're going to talk about how to string up a bead loom and how to get started with bead loom, which is basically stringing seed beads onto a loom, creating a large piece of work. So I've got a few different bead looms here and I've got a few different supplies. There's two sizes of bead looms. We've got a large one and a small one. I tend to prefer to work on the large one myself because I don't like to roll over the ends of the bead loom. That's a personal preference, because when you're doing a bracelet, sometimes you do need to roll over the ends. And I find that when you do that, it's sometimes a bit hard to get your attention to sit as nicely. I've got various different seed beads here. People will often use stuff like Delica beads, which are really fine seed beads. One advantage to them is that when you run down your finger down the side here, you're not going to have any little bumps out or anything like that because they sit really, really uniform. When you're starting out though, I would suggest you start out with size 8 seed beads. That's these guys right here. They work really well just for a starting project, and it's easy to work your design up and so on. And then you can start to get a little crazier. So I've got some here that have, these have bugle beads in here, which creates a different sort of design. Or you can even get crazy and go into the leather as your warp threads and so on. Anyways, let's get started with the actual loom itself and how to string it up and so on. I'm just going to switch cameras here and we'll get it over to a close-up camera here that helps with stringing. So what I'm working with is I'm working with a Nymo thread right now. So this is a thread that's not going to stretch and it's quite durable. You can also use something called Fireline. Now Fireline is basically, it came out of the fishing industry and it's more durable and tough than the Nymo thread. But because you're using a lot of threads, sometimes the Nymo thread is better price point per meter and so on. Anyways, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by tying to the one end of my bead loom here. So I'm just going to tie it to the little point on the end here. Which is always easy until you go live. All right, so just anything that'll hold it. And then we're going to bring it over the loom to the other end here. Hook around the end, and that's where you start laying it down into the grooves here. So when it comes to stringing, what you need to think about is how many rows of beads you want to cross. Because when you're stringing your rows of warp threads here, which is what these are, you need to thread one extra warp thread for every seed bead that you thread. So if I've got 7 seed beads in my pattern, I need to thread 8 warp threads. So I'm just going to do one more across here. And then just loop it around the end here. And we'll just tie it off here. For demonstration purposes, I'm not making this too wide. I figured it was easier to demonstrate with. And I picked out a mixture of size 8 seed beads here to just show you with. This actually is one of the mixtures that we sell in the store. I thought it would work out really nice as a starting point here. So I've got the yellow mixture here, or the gold mix, I think it's called. Anyways, so when it comes to starting out on the loom, what we're going to do is we're going to take the thread. So I've pre-threaded up my thread because I didn't want to do it while I was sitting with you guys. So I'm going to just loop through the outside edge thread here. And I'm going to basically just tie it on. So once I've got that secured onto my thread here, now I've left this tail long enough that I can thread a needle onto it later and hide it. That's usually a good plan, because otherwise you've got these threads sticking out of your work later that you have to deal with. So I have 6 threads across my bead loom here, which means that I can pick up 5 seed beads. So I'm just going to pick 5 up onto my needle here. So when it comes to picking needles for bead loom projects, you often do want to pick a longer needle, because you're stretching across your project here, and you want to make sure that the beads will sit on the needle and not basically pull out of the way and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull those 5 beads across here, put my finger under them to pop them up. So I've come underneath my warp threads here, and now I'm going to come back on top of all those warp threads. So I got to make sure that when I stitch across, my needle is going over top of all of those warp threads. I'm going to pull it tight, and that's my first row right there. So now we go and we pick up another 5 seed beads here. I'm coming underneath. So always remember, underneath when you go across the first time, pop them up 1 bead in between each of those warp threads, and then I'm going to come back across on top with my needle. So one way you can double check to make sure you've caught everyone is you can actually just tap it with your finger, and if one of the beads drops, you know you haven't caught it and it's not sitting. So again, we'll come across, and I'm going to pop my beads up, and I come back with the needle on top. So that's a few rows done right off the bat there. Now I talked about hiding that tail thread. One of the ways that I like to hide it is simply by threading a needle onto it. So I've got an easy eye needle here. An easy eye needle has the center of the needle being the opening area, and basically you can stitch each way with it. So I'm going to put my thread onto it, and to hide my tail end, all I'm going to do is stitch back through the rows I've already done. By doing that, I'm getting rid of that tail end. So we'll just pull that off, and I can trim off the tail end here, and it's all disappeared. So you're going to work this until you have it long enough to do a bracelet. And then we're going to talk about ends. And there's a few different ways that you can end off a bracelet. One of the ways that I really like are these slide ends. So slide ends are basically a tube that you're going to slide the last row of your beads into. And then you just basically clamp the ends down, and you can attach whatever clasp you want on. So in this case, we put what's called a ball and socket clasp on it. Now these come in different lengths. So if you have a really wide piece, you can actually use a longer one, and it'll help you do your ends. Sorry, I'm coughing a bit here. Now, another way that you can end it off is using these various different slide end clasps. So these slide apart. Now this is the clasp itself, so you don't actually need any extra pieces. You just take the warp threads and you attach to each of the loops here. Now I've pulled some 3-strand ones, and I've also got a 7-strand one here. They come in 4-strand, 5-strand, 2-strand. So there's a various different colors as well. And then another way to end it is actually to add some leather on the end. So this is ultra suede. And what I've done is I've actually woven a few rows of just the thread by itself. That gives me something that I can glue the ultra suede to, which ends your end off. So I hope that this gets you started threading a loom and starting your project. If you have any questions, certainly leave them in the comments below and we'll do what we can to answer them. And yeah, hope you learned something, and I give you a good day. Thanks.